We're now starting the 315 presentation, Defeating Social Engineering with Voice Analytics by Doug Mohney.
Testing. Everybody? Do I need to move the mic up, or can everybody hear me okay? Everybody got me? You got me good? Good in the back? Okay. What I'm going to do is talk about where I'm coming from. I'm going to talk about voice analytics, defining that, talk about the applications of voice analytics today in the real world, and then take some of those real world models, templates, and then apply them to using voice analytics, that technology, as a defense against social engineering attacks. By no means. Defeating is probably a little bit of an extreme word, especially considering how creative people can be. I should change that to different. All right, where am I coming from? I've been the news and online editor for Vaughn Magazine for about 3 years. We cover VoIP and IP communications. Remember that? We're going to come back to that in a second. I also cover security issues and enterprise issues. If you want a real-world consultant on IT security issues, go hire one. Not me. I'm going to talk about voice analytics. What is it? Again, talk about how features of voice analytics are being used in the corporate sector for security purposes today, and then applying voice analytics as a defense layer against social engineering attacks. So voice analytics, what is it? Definition, basically it's analyzing the spoken content of, I'm going to go on a limb here and say recorded conversations. Mostly we mean telephone conversations. You'll also see vendors refer to their solutions, and they'll talk about speech analytics. It's the same thing. It's being able to look at a voice conversation, either off the phone or on the radio in some cases, and pulling out data out of it in order to do useful things. For this presentation, we're going to talk about voice print identification. We're going to talk about word spotting, that is actually plucking out or identifying words within a conversation. Talk about emotion detection a little bit. And then we'll talk a little bit about talk analysis, where companies look at words they've spotted, emotion detection, and combined all that with call data and statistical analysis to come up with some interesting findings, especially in the call center world. Basically, you can think of voice analytics as data mining phone calls. I really didn't mean the NSA, but I want to put this into perspective. The legend of Echelon is a national security agency, slurps up all overseas phone calls. Then massive computer farms scan those calls for keywords and voice prints. There's been speculation that the U.S. government has had this capability as early as 1982. If you look at the work by James Banford, The Puzzle Palace. Anybody read that? Yep. I got one person. Yeah, I got one person in the back hiding. And then later on, you had a report of the Echelon program between 1999 and 2000. So, if you want to go and assume that 1982 is the earliest capability, there's been about 24 years plus or minus of development of being able to go into phone calls and pulling out keywords. But the reality today, it's a lot more corporate. Corporate America has its own Echelon program. And what do I mean by that? Voice print and voice analytics are in use in call centers today. And again, the big users are call centers. And call centers, what do I mean by a call center? Basically, anytime you make a phone call for customer service, or it's not sent overseas, even sometimes when it is sent overseas, for technical support or for billing problem or things like that, it goes into a call center. Call centers are using voice analytics technology for fraud detection and fraud prevention. They're using it for operational efficiencies, for doing things like training, for call escalation. And more, they're mining that data that they're collecting from the thousands and thousands of calls they give every day. They're mining it for real-time business intelligence. They're able to look at the text, in essence, of what happens when people call in, and they're able to spot things like competitors' offers, or problems in their customer service. Multiple vendors out on the market, and I was really surprised once I started looking into this. Multiple vendors right now are building parts and pieces of speech analytics, voice analytics solutions for the call center market. And then also call monitoring is also used for regulatory compliance in the financial and healthcare industries, and I'll get into a little bit more than that later. But basically, when you started talking about things like HIPAA and Sarbanes-Oxley and get the lawyers involved, the lawyers make people very paranoid, and they suddenly think that they have to record everything, because if they don't have their bases covered. So why do call centers do that? Record calls and look at the inbound calls? Well, basically, with a call center, efficiency is everywhere. Somebody calls in, it's costing you money. For the phone call, it's costing you time. For the person who answers the call. So call centers want to be able to get service calls, customer calls resolved faster. They want happier customers, and they want lower costs. And call centers have built these large data collection mechanisms, basically because disks are cheap, processors are cheap, and the software, the secret sauce, well, that's a little bit more expensive. But they can record all the calls coming into their call centers, tens of thousands of calls per day, and then run a batch job at night and look at generate statistics off of those calls that they can use to tweak the business the next day. Voice analytics, like I said, it allows companies to spot, is already today allowing companies to spot competitive trends, what their competitors are doing in real time, basically. Enabling technologies. Everybody's running IP. Everybody's talking about IP PBXs these days. And once you turn something into bits, the next step from turning something into bits is you can do anything with it. Over the last 2 to 3 months, there's been a flood of press releases from different vendors saying that they'll give you a software module, or they'll give you a 1U rack mount box that you can plug into your data center rack, and you can record all the phone calls that goes on within the business. What you're starting to see is that as IP PBX vendors need more features to sell their products, a recording capability is going to get built into IP PBXs as a standard feature. Right now, most companies, it's an add-on, it's a third-party add-on. You go buy your IP PBX, you go buy your third-party software package, you plug the two things in, and then all of a sudden all the calls within a business are recorded and written out on the disk. And again, cheap processors, cheap disks. You can store everything, you can analyze everything. Software is off the shelf. Like I said, there are many vendors who are doing voice print identification, and they're also the more sophisticated upper-end types are doing analysis. So if you're already recording calls for regulatory purposes, or if you're already recording IP phone calls for what they call quality assurance purposes, being able to take that data and mine it is the next step. Okay, and again, like I said, contact centers, they want to data mine all the thousands of phone calls that come into them on a daily basis. Financial institutes, banking and insurance, especially, are starting to use voice analytics as a filter mechanism to spot cons. We'll get them, and insurance fraud. I'll get into more of that a little bit later. And then commercial organizations want to ensure the confidentiality of their data. So I want to talk a little bit about voice print identification and some of the other features of the things you can do with calls. And then I'm going to put it all together in a package later on. Voice print identification is probably the thing that we're most familiar with. The voice is my password type of thing. Sneakers, everybody see sneakers? Yes. No. Where you've got a unique digital pattern to your voice, and it's a biometric means of identifying somebody based upon the sound of your voice. And there are multiple commercial solutions available for password replacement, and then they're starting to get plugged into organizations such as Nuance's things speaker verification. Getting rid of a password and using voice print identification is very attractive for a lot of companies, and I'll get into why in a couple of slides. But Nuance, for instance, claims that they have over 150 million secure calls, whatever that means, annually, out of their customer base. And then The people using them are financial services, telecommunications, utilities, transport, and manufacturing. What are the commercial benefits of using voice print ID? Well, guess what? You get rid of pins and password administration. And it sounds like a trivial thing and until you scale from, from 10 people using, having to deal with 10 people with user IDs and passwords to tens of thousands of people that have passwords or pins. All of a sudden, you've built yourself when you have many, many thousands of people, you built yourself a big administrative headache because people are going to lose passwords. People are going to forget passwords. They don't use them for a while. And then having to reset passwords, it takes time. So companies see that they can get savings if they use voice print ID because they don't have to have an agent on the phone going through the verifying, okay, what's your mother's maiden name? When were you born? What's your dog's favorite name? They don't have to go through all that. They've got voice print on file. People aren't going to lose their password. Voice print also provides another means of identifying someone. So they're reducing the potential for fraud and identity theft if they've got a documented voice print and they can use voice print to verify your ID, verify who you are. How's it used? Basically, you authenticate your identity the first time around. You'll make a baseline voice print or train a recognition package of some sort by selective vocabulary. You read off a set of words, basically. Insurance companies are using voice print more and more for whitelisting and blacklisting people. Whitelisting means that if you called your insurance agent once before at a call center and he's got the call on file, well, he's got your voice print on file. So if you call back and you say, I've got a claim, on my house just burned down, you can go look back 6 months ago and take a look at when you're having a conversation the first 6 months ago when you were setting up your insurance, look at when you're making the claim now and verify that, oh yes, you're the person that has the insurance policy with us. Conversely, insurance companies are using voice print for blacklist, for spotting known bad actors. And they're starting to use this in combination in building big databases. If you look at some of the reports of Katrina fraud, you get one guy who's, makes 10, 15, 20 claims. It's the same guy who's just calling in to different people at different times. He's got different address, i.e. a different post office box. Of course, he's homeless from Katrina, so of course he's got a post office box. He's got a different story. He's got a different ID, but his voice print's the same. If you've got all those calls recorded coming into a call center, you can filter out and you can look at, hey, wait a minute, this guy is calling in 3 or 4 different times, but he's got 4 different names. Something's wrong. We need to look into that. More and more, you're likely to see voice print start to proliferate for more consumer financial uses, such as verifying your ID for credit card or some banking applications in the next few years, just because all you have to do is speak and they know who you are. Again, you don't have to go through this multi-minute thing of identifying your social security number, your mother's maiden name, or whatever. You don't have to remember that either. Again, plenty of vendors offering this and then, making the claims that you implement voice print as a password replacement, you reduce your admin expenses, and cut down on your live agent support. You don't have to have as many people answering the phones